Alien movies can be a dime a dozen, including all those trashy ones by the Asylum that were released to cash in on whatever was popular at the time, but sometimes, just sometimes, there's that really weird one. That weird one that's known for something specific, like a standout scene, special effects, or in today's case, a particular performance. 1989's Communion wasn't a hit with critics or audiences, but does have a few things going for it. What did star Christopher Walken think of the critique of his performance? What enraged the screenwriter about the movie and his own book? Finally, what famous musician composed the movie's theme? All this and more as we look at the movie, the book, and the purported true story of 1989's Communion. Alien movies can go a couple ways. They can be heavy sci-fi and action-oriented, like, well, Aliens as an example, or they can be horror, like, well, Alien as an example. Well, there's more than just the Alien movies, but you see what I'm going for. Communion does none of that, and has one of the most interesting backstories you can find. Before we get to the 1989 movie, let's look at the 1987 book and the man who wrote it, Whitley Strieber. Then we'll look at the making of the movie and if the thing is any good, quite frankly, or at least my opinion of it. Communion, A True Story, was a novel written by author Whitley Strieber and released in February of 1987. It follows the supposed true account of the author experiencing lost time and attributing it to being abducted by aliens, well, sort of. It spent 6 months on the non-fiction bestseller list, and its cover, done by artist Ted Seth Jacobs, is widely considered to be one of the most recognizable images of pop culture in regard to the extremely popular gray aliens phenomenon. Interestingly enough, the image was described to Jacobs from Strieber until it ended up being exactly what he claimed to have seen. The book itself has infiltrated UFO pop culture as well, with appearances in X-Files, albeit in a lovingly mocking way. Heck, it even got a concept album made of it by Swedish progressive metal band Evergrey called In Search of Truth. It's also not just a sci-fi book either. Unlike most sci-fi and horror work, it's supposed to be something that actually happened. On December 26, 1985, Whitley Strieber claims that he was abducted from his cabin in upstate New York by sentient, non-human life forms. Notice I didn't say aliens. Right there is why we can't call the work sci-fi anymore, as it's presented as fact and was released as non-fiction. It's also interesting to note that while the cover has since become famous for its alien imagery, Strieber refers to them as the visitors, as to be more neutral and not lock himself into the camp that he was abducted by aliens. His follow-up book, Transformation from 1988, was listed as fiction by the publisher, which angered Strieber, who claimed this sort of act was hurting human progress for multiple generations. A little bit harsh, but I'd probably feel the same if someone said what I believe to have really happened to me was a work of fiction. He would release 3 additional follow-up books with Breakthrough, The Next Step in 1995, The Secret School in 96, and Solving the Communion Enigma, What Is to Come in 2011. These books flow with newer theories of the time, and Strieber even stated that parallel universes and time travel could be real, which are also possible explanations for many of the experiences that people who claim to be abducted could have gone through. On the other side of the coin, not only have people pointed out that the descriptions of the visitors match those of characters described in his very fiction novel Cat Magic, something he claims to be subliminal and coincidental, but medical science may have an answer too. Neurologist Stephen Novella brought up that the situation described by the author is in line with something called hypnagogia, which feels like paralysis and has been mistaken fairly often for demonic possession or alien encounters. While he has written numerous books detailing his and others' experiences with UFOs and UFO-related things like abductions, crop circles, and cattle mutilations, he remains nebulous, pun very much intended, about his own experiences. While he believes that humans are being herded and studied by a higher power, he isn't quite convinced that what happened to him was an alien abduction. Looking even deeper into the man, he also wrote 2 novels that became 2 of the more interesting takes on classic monsters. The Wolfen, released in 1978, was about murders by a race of intelligent beings that descended from the Canids and would be turned into the other werewolf movie of 1981, starring Albert Finney, Gregory Hines, Edward James Olmos, and Tom Noonan, simply called Wolfen. After that came a different take on the vampire mythos. These were sci-fi vamps, not space Draculas like Mario Bava's Planet of the Vampires, but a completely foreign race of creatures that were not human in origin like most vampire stories are. The Hunger would be released in 1981, the same year as the movie for Walken, and would subsequently be made into its own movie in 1983 by Tony Scott, starring Susan Sarandon, David Bowie, and Catherine Deneuve. Both of these movies would be cult classics, and The Hunger would even get 2 sequels, at least in book form, in 2001 with The Last Vampire and 2003 with Lilith's Dream, A Tale of the Vampire Life. Unfortunately, none of his fiction novels would really take off or be made into films after these two, and he changed over to speculative fiction with novels about post-nuclear war or environmental disasters, with the most famous now being The Day After Tomorrow. That story, of course, was turned into a movie in 2004 starring Jake Gyllenhaal. The real star of his writing comes from his previously mentioned Alien Inquiry novels about his own experiences, and that brings us to the very strange movie version of Communion, starring, of all people, Christopher Walken as Whitley Strieber himself, released on November 10, 1989. Strieber chose to produce it independently as he feared that a big studio would try to jam in too many special effects and turn it into a horror film, whereas he wanted a character piece that would take the material seriously and show exactly what he went through in real life. This, spoiler alert, did not happen. He even went on to decline offers from Universal Studios and no less than Steven Spielberg, but good for him for sticking with his gut. Strieber also chose a director that he was friends with so that he could write the script with zero interference and that the director could direct the movie with zero interference. That director ended up being Australian Philippe Mora, who he met in the 60s and then again after Mora finished shooting his 1986 film Death of a Soldier with James Coburn. The French-born and Australian-raised director is still working hard heading into his 80s with 7 projects currently in development. While I've covered him for back-to-back Howling sequels with Part 2, Your Sister is a Werewolf, maybe one of the best bad movies of all time, and Part 3, which is one of the best 80s late Ozploitation films, he's much more than that. He did fantastic documentaries like Swastika on the Nazification of Germany from 1933 to 1945, and Brother, Can You Spare a Dime on the Great Depression, but also really fun stuff like A Breed Apart, Mad Dog Morgan, The Beast Within, and The Return of Captain Invincible. He may be an odd choice for this movie, but that's precisely why he was the right choice, and he is one of the only aspects I don't really have a complaint about, but more on that later. To play Strieber, Christopher Walken was chosen, and boy, was that a choice. Walken had already done it all at this point. TV shows, won an Oscar for The Deer Hunter, been in mega flop Heaven's Gate, horror like The Dead Zone, and even a Bond villain in A View to a Kill. This movie is just a weird entry for anyone's resume, but somehow, for Walken, it just added to his overall mystique and charm and kind of fits in. The supporting cast includes character actors Francis Sternhagen from The Mist and Outland, and Andreas Katsoulas from The Fugitive and, 111 episodes of Babylon 5. To play Annie Strieber, Philippe Mora had Walken involved in the casting, and he decided that Academy Award nominee Lindsay Krause would make a good choice, which, as far as I can tell, they never worked together before this, so I'm not sure where he came up with that. Back to Walken and his eccentricities. While the final product on screen saves the movie, kind of, it wasn't the best thing in the opinion of the writer. You know, the guy who allegedly went through all the stuff they were putting on film. Strieber didn't think Walken was accurately portraying him on screen or that he was being a bit too silly, and when he finally decided to speak to him about it and said that maybe he was playing him a little too crazy, Walken simply responded, "Well, if the shoe fits," which is a perfectly Christopher Walken thing to say if we're being honest, and I won't attempt an impersonation because it won't be good. A lot of what Walken did on set was improvised as Mora allowed him to come up with his own behaviors and tics and say his lines in the way he wanted to or even tweak them into something new. Walken laughing the first time he sees the visitor creatures was one of these that was actually true as the first time he'd seen them, and he laughed, and I laughed too. Mora liked it though, although he thought it made the scene more unsettling, something I didn't connect with, and decided to keep it in the film. Another example of this freedom was when Walken holds the alien face over his. The scene was actually 2 minutes long, with Walken trying on multiple masks, even if it's only seconds long in the final product. Sadly, just like Walken, many members of the crew also made jests at Strieber's expense while not believing his experiences. Strieber was quoted as saying, "Movie sets have jerks and nice folks, and we definitely have both on this movie." Other strange behind-the-scenes things that happened on independent movies like these are that Mora was assigned a cheap assistant director, as they only had about a week to film exterior shots of New York City. The first part of the opening scenes were utilized by a cameraman being flown around the city using a time-lapse camera, but the rest of the shots? They were done by that assigned assistant director, who was very old and deaf. While that created some difficulties with the short time frame they had, they were able to make it work out okay and got what they needed. The last little bit of behind-the-scenes info is this. While the movie never had a properly released score or soundtrack, the opening musical number, that plays again near the end, was actually composed and performed by Eric Clapton. Can you imagine what this movie would have been without him and Walken bringing massive star power and talent to the proceedings? The movie wrapped with a final budget of $7 million and was released on November 10, 1989. While a nice aspect of the whole thing was Strieber setting up special screenings for alleged alien abduction victims in cities like New York, San Diego, San Antonio, and St. Louis, the movie bombed. It brought home a very small $1.9 million and wasn't loved by critics. While many praised Walken's performance, ironic considering the very man he played didn't like it, the movie only holds a 46% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, and because of the smaller release in general, it was only reviewed by a tiny number of reviewers. Furthermore, Strieber wasn't happy with the final product either. He felt that the movie was too far literal in its adaptation of the book's source material, and that the nuance he experienced was lost and shoveled into the alien abduction camp, along with many other movies on the subject matter were. Things got nasty after the fact too, behind the scenes. The movie's smaller production company, Pheasantry Films, and its distributor, Bancania, filed a lawsuit against Virgin Vision and MCEG for a number of things, including negligence, fraud, breach of contract, bad faith, wrongful interference, and breach of fiduciary duty. Virgin had failed to pay $1.5 million, remember that number, that was part of their guarantee for distribution rights. Both parties also failed to disclose the purchase of Virgin by MCEG, and neither company properly reported the theatrical or video gross revenues. When it was all said and done, instead of just having to pay that $1.5 million they agreed on, the two companies were forced to pay $150 million in damages. Ouch. Now, as far as the film goes, I really didn't like it. I had seen it show up on a ton of different movie lists in my time, including Best Walken Performance, Best Hidden Gem Alien Movies, Best Adaptations, but really, I just didn't enjoy it as much as I wanted to. First, I'll start with the positives though. Anytime Christopher Walken is on screen, it is at least interesting. While the author, screenwriter, executive producer, all wrapped into one, didn't find his performance endearing, and understandably so, it's hard not to be drawn into him. Whether he is being silly, like in the beginning when he dances around his home trying to get words written for a book, or being emotional, like when he takes a shotgun around his cabin to hunt aliens and almost shoots his wife, he's nothing if not interesting. As weird as his reputation has become over the years, and he is weird, don't get me wrong, he's also undoubtedly a great actor. When he talks about his experiences to his wife or doctor or therapist, he shows real depth. When he interacts with his son, you can feel the love he's trying to show. When he's scared or thinks he's going crazy, you feel all that too. My favorite scene in the movie is very Walken heavy, as in two of him, and is probably the best example of horror that the movie provides. At just under 90 minutes into the film, Strieber, the main character in the movie, which is weird because it's also the dude that wrote the book, screenplay, and lived through the events. Anyway, he has had therapy and even attended a group of people that have had similar experiences to his own. After this, he decides that enough is enough and goes back to the cabin where everything occurred and confront who or what it was that took him away and made him lose time. He goes to the cabin where he is dressed to the nines and brings a video camera, but isn't totally sure what's going to happen, if anything at all will happen. It's great non-verbal and facial acting from Walken, who just looks like a man who was torn up from this thing that happened to him. He walks into their ship, or, the bright light that approximates the ship, and finds the two different types of visitors. He knows he's awake at this point, which is terrifying, and tries to interact with and communicate with them the best he can. There are handshakes, high fives, and it becomes a dance party. Yes, really. While that seems out of place and not very scary, another version of Strieber comes in as a magician with his assistant. He just looks creepy here, and they distort his voice at irregular intervals. It almost goes in line with Strieber's theory of time displacement or time travel and alternate universes, but then the really cheesy alien effects kind of get creepy. They pull off part of the mask to reveal a slightly more disturbing and wet costume that is much more menacing. He also knows that he is not going to get the answers, as the bizarro version of Walken, strange to say with how bizarre the dude is in general, tells him that the visitors are what his mind wants to make of them, and he will never really know. He also comes to the realization that these entities have been with him his whole life, and how he sees them and feels was passed down by his father and will be passed down to his son by him, if it hasn't already happened. Based on the conversations he has with his son, Sam, it probably already hit. Another out-of-place but good horror scene is when he takes Sam trick-or-treating in an apartment complex at around 24 minutes in. There's a long hallway leading to a spooky pumpkin that also has Walken making generic ghost sounds, something that would scare anyone, and when they get to the end, it's Strieber who is scared the most when someone in a costume jumps out at him, and it awakens something in him that he may have seen in his displacement. It turns out just to be a younger teen in a costume having fun, but the terror he elicits combined with the jump scare works in a way it shouldn't. Basically anything to do with the horror aspects, even little ones like when the visitors can be barely seen lurking in the cabin, or Christopher Walken, make the movie worth watching. It also has to be said that as a movie, it's more than competent. Mora, for all the grief associated with him for some of the less than objectively stellar movies he's done in his career, is a pretty good director. It's also shot very well and is easy to look at. The locations make sense and utilize the small budget very well. Now, for the things that turn me off to the experience. The special effects don't work for me and signal a movie's smaller budget. Even smaller movies from earlier in the 80s like Extro made this work to their benefit, but for Communion, I almost wish they didn't show the visitors at all. Strieber agrees as one of his problems with the movie was that we see the creatures too much and they're far too well lit for anything that we might have been expecting. It honestly kind of takes me out of the experience, but I was also expecting something a little more frightening along the same lines as Fire in the Sky, which I covered recently. To be fair, had I done the research part of this before watching the movie, I think I would have had a better level set going in. Basically, my problem is that it's not scary enough to be a horror movie, not presented as fictional enough to fall under the sci-fi banner, and not serious enough to be placed alongside some of the other alien abduction movies we've seen. I guess that does lend some credence towards its ultimate place in cinema history. It's a weird little movie that is hard to categorize and doesn't fit inside a specific box, which also makes it a strange recommendation. Ultimately, I just found it boring overall. It eventually ended up on the popular comedy podcast How Did This Get Made, but I also struggle with that as I don't see it as so bad it's good, just a weird piece of cinematic history. It falls under the purportedly true story nonfiction, and while it was debated, at least he is an author and a scholar who double, triple, and quadrupled down on this with all the follow-up books. This is a credit to him, as Travis Walton was just some guy who made a claim that was a little easier to pick apart. He also claimed aliens and what they did to him, where Strieber genuinely seems just like a dude who is traumatized and frustrated by lost time from an experience he can't explain and is seeking answers for. While I do find the movie boring, like I said, I'll still end up recommending it as what the heck do I know? It could be someone's favorite movie. What do you think of Communion and Strieber's experience? Have you given this movie a chance already, or will you seek answers in the unknown? Either way, if you see a magician looking like Christopher Walken with a distorted voice, maybe just go the other way this time.
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. We're an independent company and we appreciate all of your support.